What's up, everybody? So, for today's video, we're going to be reacting to Rick and Morty Season 6, Episode 9 breakdown. I was planning on watching this few days ago. But I've just been watching a lot of Boruto lately. So, you know what? I said to myself, fuck it, bro. We're just gonna watch this shit, bro. We're just gonna play this video, and we're gonna get lit, man. So, yeah, man, without further ado, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, boom.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Whitney Van Lanningham, and today we're traveling to the surface of the sun, where you might get knighted with a sword and lose your impaler if you catch my drift. Today, I'm going to take you frame by frame through the penultimate episode of Season 6 of Rick and Morty to break down all the details you might have missed. First, let's talk about that episode title. A Rick and King Mortar's Mort is a play on Disney's 1995 A Kid in King Arthur's Court, which itself is a loose adaptation of Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Actually, both of these namesakes have parallels with this very episode. A Kid in King Arthur's Court is about a baseball-playing teen who's sent back in time and introduces Camelot to radical 90s technological marvels like rollerblades and CD players. In Connecticut Yankee, a 19th century engineer sent back in time to 6th century England, and his scientific know-how allows him to rival Merlin the Wizard. He even uses knowledge of a solar eclipse to display his magic. This engineer's presence modernizes the past while also creating dangerous conflict with the Catholic Church, which upholds Arthurian society's status quo. Similar to these stories, this episode features Morty's introduction of modern science to an Arthurian culture, which eventually modernizes it, but also unravels the fabric of society that keeps the peace. The episode opens on an asteroid, where Morty is excited to get in line for a rare pop-up food joint. Obviously, the episode makes fun of the soulless art of standing in line for hours waiting for a pop-up, but I definitely was one of the 500 people waiting in line to get an overpriced t-shirt from the Rickmobile a few years ago. So was Pugsley. So Rick may hate lines, but his marketing guy loves them. If we peep the signage on the building that the line extends in front of, it looks to be written in a language reminiscent of Star Wars' Arabesh alphabet. When Morty kindly returns a space sandwich to a pair of passing knights, they admire his honesty, kindness, and love of following rules, and see that he too could make a great member of their knighthood. These soldiers are the Knights of the Sun, and their order upholds the balance of the solar system by protecting the solar scepter, which they believe the solar system revolves around. Throughout history, there have been plenty of knights, families, and countries that have used the sun as part of the heraldry, but these knights seem to be inspired by the knights from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and the Warriors of Sunlight from Dark Souls. The Warriors of Sunlight are known for their Praise the Sun emote that this knight briefly copies. This blonde knight is actually voiced by British comedian and star of Peep Show and That Mitchell and Webb look, David Mitchell. His comedic partner Robert Webb plays the redheaded Knight of the Sun seen later in the episode, and their Peep Show castmate Matt King plays the pooping Knight of the Sun towards the back half of the end. Sir Helios offers Morty his sacred solar sword as a reward for Morty picking up his fallen sandwich, believing his actions prove that he has a good heart. The two explain that they are defenders of Helios, the center of this solar system. In Greek mythology, Helios is a god of and the embodiment of the sun, who iconically pulled his chariot of fire across the sky each day. After some pressure from the knights and alien onlookers, Morty agrees to take the sword against Rick's advice. The knights dub Morty Sir Mortaniel so that he can have a 3-syllable knighty name, which is sorta unnecessary considering that Morty's full name, Mortimer, is already 3 syllables and kinda knighty already. To begin the transfer of title and power over to his successor, the knight stabs himself and his life energy returns to the sun. Before Morty is teleported Bifrost style, he tells Rick off, calling him a boring, cranky drunk. These words seem to hit Rick's thawing post-Pissmaster Season 6 heart, making him exclaim, ouch. Instead of retaliating against Morty for ignoring his advice like he's done in the past, he decides to fully support Morty, including his mistakes. On the surface of the sun, Sir Mortaniel is introduced to the Knights of the Sun, and announced as Sir Helios' successor. One knight looks like he was modeled after Game of Thrones' Samwell Tarly, and is voiced by Weird Al star Daniel Radcliffe. If you haven't seen or read Game of Thrones, Sam Tarly was a part of the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch took vows of celibacy, just not as aggressively as the self-castrated Knights of the Sun. Like Diedrich Bader before him, Radcliffe is actually a fan of Rick and Morty, and has apparently been sought after for a role on the series in the past. Justin Roiland actually suggested him to play young Morty in those live-action shorts, but obviously Radcliffe was way too old for the part. Unfortunately, Mortaniel learns that in order to become a knight, you have to cut your own peener off and toss it into the sun. This stumping of the pump is a play on religious circumcision, but far more gruesome. I don't even want to look at these artistic depictions of this happening, let alone hear about it. Don't do that! Leave your dicks alone! Below those horrifying images is a stained glass wheel featuring images of all the Sun Kings of the past. Luckily, Rick shows up just in time to help Morty escape. Due to his scientific prowess, he can comfortably walk around on the sun's surface as if he were native to its fire, surprising the Knights. He hands his grandson a sword that recently used its AI combat analyzing algorithms to study Wesley Snipes' Blade films, and Morty easily defeats the Sun King in combat, becoming the Sun's very first king with an attached penis. He bids the Knights farewell and basically tells them to leave him alone. When they get home, Rick's sword is still carrying out some moves from Blade's fight against Deacon Frost from 1998's Blade. A cup of good coffee is like a cozy blanket in a mug that goes in your tummy. It's delicious at any rate, and Trade Coffee can help you up your and access to limited time holiday specials at drinktrade.com/newrockstars. That's drinktrade.com/newrockstars for $30 off your subscription to the best coffees in the country. Morty doesn't understand why Rick is being so normal to him after he A. dragged his grandpa to an annoying food stand, B. refused to take his advice, C. took a random sword from a guy who unalived goodbyed himself, C. almost got his Johnson snipped off, and D. needed Rick's intervention to get them both home. Normally, if something like this happened, Rick would be rubbing all of this in Morty's face, but instead, he's showing Morty empathy and kindness. Season 6 Rick is different. Over the course of this season, we've seen him move away from several of his toxic personality traits, like when he made the choice to finally move on from Diane's death, allowing him to be more present with his living family. He saves Morty from royal life well lived, bonds with Jerry during final decimation, and even takes on the Pissmaster mantle after finally learning to empathize and de-escalate. Here, it seems like he's trying to put more effort into caring about Morty's feelings, but Rick seems to finally understand why Morty didn't listen to him. After countless episodes of ragging on his grandson, his opinion just doesn't hold much weight anymore. He promises to be 22% nicer to Morty for the rest of the episode/adventure. The Knights reappear, roasting the neighbor's house in the Smith's garage. They insist on serving King Mortaniel. Addressing Rick as Wizard, Daniel Radcliffe's Knight explains to the family that it's their people's duty to protect the Solar Scepter, aka the device that acts as the literal center of the solar system, around which every single planet orbits. Actually, Beth, these Knights may not know it, but yes, that's exactly what it metaphorically does. In hindsight, the scepter being protected by the Sun King does prevent Jupiter, Saturn, and all the other planets from bumping into each other politically. Hearing how dumb the Knights sound, Morty seizes the opportunity to teach them some 6th grade science, destroying their belief system and convincing them that the scepter is merely a cultural artifact. I love how when Morty is lecturing the Knights, Rick is off-screen collecting their scepter. Instead of revealing the scepter himself, he kicks it over to Morty in a box, supporting Morty and giving him the spotlight with its reveal. Disillusioned and dickless, the Knights leave to find some skag. When this Knight pulls out his phone, he's actually not Googling despair and instead has pulled up an episode of the History of New York podcast about architecture. Rick proudly announces to the family that Morty used critical thinking and basic physics to destroy his first religion. But as Morty recounts the way he and his grandpa learned to support each other better, the sun looms brightly and ominously in the background behind them. Suddenly, a solar flare bursts from the sun, causing Earth's electronics to go haywire. IRL, the radiation from solar flares can cause blackouts and radio signal disruption. The Knight, played by Matt King, emerges from the bathroom and learns that not only are the Sons of the Moon invading their city, the other Knights of the Sun have completely disbanded while he was pooping, and political turmoil has erupted in the solar system. This outlines one of the episode's core themes, that traditions may be silly and incorrect, but if they're foundational to a society, removing them may cause numerous unintended consequences. Rick, Morty, and the rest of the Smiths look down on the Knights for their beliefs, not realizing their beliefs do serve a solar system-wide purpose. In order to solve the mess he's made, Morty's gonna have to understand the problem he's caused from a human angle, not a sciencey one. To fix this burgeoning interplanetary war, Rick and Morty head to an area of the moon labeled Ye Olde Neutral Zone. This agreed-upon gray zone for diplomacy in the solar system could be a reference to the neutral zones in Star Trek. In Star Trek lore, there's been both a Romulan Federation neutral zone and a Klingon Federation zone, which acted as buffers between these empires and the United Federation of Planets. As Rick and Morty approach the Conference of Planets, Morty's surprised that Rick doesn't know more about the rest of their galaxy, and he responds that hanging out on Pluto is Jerry League shit when he can be visiting more interesting universes and dimensions. This is of course a callback to Season 1 Something Wicked This Way Comes, where Jerry became a prominent scientific figurehead on Pluto when he defended its claims of planethood. The corrupt government of Pluto used its false planetary status to con its people into ignoring the environmental hazards of mining plutonium, which was shrinking the planet as a result. We don't see Scrooby Noobers or any other Plutonians in this episode, so I wonder if this shrinking crisis caused the collapse of their society, or has prevented them from engaging with the solar war in some way. Inside the negotiation tent, representatives for 7 of the 8 planets in the Milky Way are present, with Uranus being MIA. That said, not all parties in this solar war are present. The initial aggressors in this conflict, the Sons of the Moon, are absent as well, though we do see their barbarian-inspired war parties later on in the episode. In this week's Behind the Episode feature, the crew of Rick and Morty described that they wanted this episode to feel like Morty was dropped into Season 6 of Game of Thrones without time to comb through all its dense lore. We see this on full display in this scene, and Morty even comments that he's not gonna read all the books, a joke about the lengthy A Song of Ice and Fire novels. To break down the players in this solar war, let's go in planetary order. First, we have the representatives of Mercury, who don Greco-Roman style armor. You'll notice that the Mercurial people all have one breast removed. This is a reference to the Amazon warriors of ancient Greece, who were fabled to have cut off their right breasts in order to improve their archery. The word Amazon actually means without a breast. Interestingly, Amazons were considered daughters of the warrior god Ares and his Roman counterpart Mars, not Mercury. Next, we have the Viscounts of Venus. Their leader, Liftor, is voiced by Jack Black, who's the perfect cherry on top of this week's stacked guest star Sunday. These Venusians are pretty goth, which sort of makes perfect sense. Venus is the most hostile planet in our solar system, with active volcanoes and a thick sulfuric atmosphere. It's actually hotter than Mercury despite being further from the sun. Because of the conditions on Venus's surface, it's no wonder that its inhabitants are indoor kids. Venus also rotates in the opposite direction of most other planets, and so slowly that its days are longer than its years. So of course it's the hot topic of planets. Earth's representative is named the Earl of Earth, and looks exactly like our human interpretation of Santa Claus, although he has no idea who Santa is when Morty refers to him as such. With his access to spacefaring tech, it's reasonable to assume that he could travel the globe in one night, so he's likely the cultural inspiration for Santa within Rick and Morty. I wonder if we'll actually get more of him in next week's Christmas episode. Next, we have Mars. The Marquis of Mars and his people are all dressed like John Carter of Mars, the protagonist in a series of novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs that were later turned into comic and film adaptations. Because Mars is a god of war, each of these Martians are missing various limbs, and they're the quickest to declare war. Jupiter also sports a Greco-Roman aesthetic, but instead of battle garb like Mercury, they favor purple robes. Jupiter was the king of the Roman gods, and purple is a color associated with royalty in ancient Greece and Rome. The leader of Jupiter calls the other planets moons, not only because of Jupiter's massive size, but also because they have 80 known satellites. 3 of Jupiter's moons, Io, Europa, and Ganymede, orbit in a pattern known as a Laplace resonance. For every complete orbit that Ganymede makes, Europa makes exactly 2, and Io makes exactly 4. It's a stretch, but the notable orbital resonance of these 3 moons might be the inspiration for Jupiter's 3-pointed symbol and triangular motifs. Saturnal people pretty obviously take pride in their rings, for which Saturn is known. They also make a mention of having all the balls, which might be a sly reference to Saturn having more moons than Jupiter, with 83 total. Their green and gold color scheme aligns with mythological Saturn's domains of agriculture, prosperity, and wealth. The rest of their design draws from Arabic cultures, despite them using Norse longships with Egyptian jackal bowsprits. This type of cultural mashup is common in fantasy and sci-fi, which makes it all the more fitting for Game of Thrones in space. Neptune makes a brief appearance, and because Neptune is an oceanic god, this representative hits the nail on the head by dressing like Poseidon. The last attendee of this meeting is the witch with stitched up eyes. The concept of a blind clairvoyant old woman is another ancient trope that spans back to the Graea or the Grey Witches in Greek mythology that shared a single eye. After Morty effectively starts Solar War I over the Scepter, Goodbye Blue Sky by Pink Floyd begins to play. This song seen in The Wall depicted the transition from times of peace into times of war as Nazi Germany rose to power, as well as the Blitz bombing of the UK. While it plays in this episode, we see Solar War I unfold. History is quite literally written in the blood of the losers, as the scepter is claimed by each planet in the war for the solar throne. It's interesting to note that the major players in this conflict don't actually die after being stabbed repeatedly. We even see a Mercurian soldier recovering from being stabbed in the chest later in the montage. This nigh immortality seems to be exactly what the Knights of the Sun claim to have, so they might really share an ancestor like Rick theorizes. The Earl of Earth is crucified on a giant X, a joke about Kris Kringle's role as a non-denominational Xmas figure. See kids, this image is what happens when you take the Christ out of Christmas. Santa dies.
Oh, don't cry, are you?
This montage also depicts how war propels scientific breakthroughs. Venus uses the new technology they've discovered from various parts of the solar system, and Saturn deploys mustard gas against Venus, a direct reference to the usage of mustard gas in World War I. As each representative falls, their likeness is added to the stained glass depiction of previous Sun Kings. One of the Martians figures out how to 3D print himself a new robot arm, and while fighting over the scepter, one of the Saturnians gives the old Three Stooges poke to one of the Mercurians. As the war rages on, Earth is taking quite a few blows, and although Morty asks Rick to jump universes like they did after the Squirrels took over, or when their homeworld got Cronenberged, Rick insists that they follow through on their commitment for a change. Morty asks him,
"What is this? Vat of acid again?"
referencing the season 4 episode where Rick pretended to support Morty in his dumb ideas as an elaborate ruse to punish him for dissing his favorite escape route, the vat of acid. This play involves hiding in a fake vat of acid for potentially hours while the coast clears. That's valuable time that Morty could use to do homework or jerk off, so he hates the time suck. This episode, however, inverts the original Vat of Acid episode. Instead of humiliating Morty and forcing him through cruel and unusual pain for rejecting his advice, Rick earnestly wants his grandson to find a solution for the consequences of his decisions. Morty accuses him of being a clone or a robot because of his behavior, and Rick remarks that their family already has enough of those. He's referencing Mechanical Summer, Mechanical Morty from Season 3's Rickmancing the Stone, the Decoy Smiths, and the cloning of Beth. Also, the way Rick words this makes me wonder if there is currently a robot hiding amongst the Smiths. Beth has her clone Space Beth, and Jerry's confirmed to be from another dimension, so I'm thinking that Summer might be the prime candidate for the next sci-fi gimmick. Morty ultimately decides that their best course of action is to simply re-illusion the Knights of the Sun and convince them to return to their posts. He finds the Knights strung out on Sweet Black Betty, their bodies impervious to overdosing on Mr. Brownstone. Morty offers to cut off his schlong in exchange for their return, and Daniel Radcliffe's Knight happily explains that this will be just as good as Dr. Feelgood itself. All these euphemisms for heroin are also rock songs: Black Betty by Ram Jam, Mr. Brownstone by Guns N' Roses, and Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue. At the stumping ceremony, Morty's handed a big old pair of rusty scissors. This could just be all the Greek mythology references bouncing around in my noggin, but I immediately thought of the fate scissors from Hercules when I saw these bad boys. I wonder if they got bent trying to cut the thread of a demigod's wang. After getting his bonus dongs intercepted by 3 layers of security, including this cute little green witch dick, Morty's faced with actually having to give his knick-knack a solar thwack. Luckily, Rick is even prepared for this exact scenario, and uses a telepathic satellite to instruct Morty to run. When they reach a dead end, Rick and Morty begrudgingly pull Rick's favorite escape plan, the Vat of Acid. Upon rewatch, knowing that the pair go the Vat of Acid route, this exchange is recontextualized. While these might seem like normal final words before diving into some plasma, these two are both well aware that they're resorting to the vat trip. Without the pressure of their lives actually at stake, Rick is honestly telling his grandson that he loves him and that he knows how much Morty hates resorting to the vat. He earnestly wishes that this adventure would end with a solution more agreeable to Morty's sensibilities. At the same time, Morty accepts that sometimes his grandfather is simply correct, and that the Vat of Acid is the way to go. Contrast this scene with the end of Season 4's Vat of Acid, where Rick forces Morty to use the vat. While the results end up pretty much the same, Rick's less toxic approach is actually the healthier move for their relationship overall. When the pair do make their jump, their poses are exactly the same as their first Season 4 Dunkaroo into the acid vat. This pose is immortalized by the Knights of the Sun in the stained glass, and apparently they also used a ladle to check that they didn't escape into a vat of fake sun. Ladles are the go-to acid vat identifying tech solar system-wise, but it looks like Rick and Morty forgot their ladle blasters this time around. That or they're opting out because Morty is such a bad shot. Like his inspiration Samuel Tarly, this night proves that he is a bit of a historian, even if his history isn't entirely accurate. In the post-credits tag, we follow an alien detective in a big Columbo coat as he busts the hot dog shrimp trafficking ring, returning the Wigglers to sea before they can be crisped. Dude should have dressed like Elliot Stabler though, because there is no way Chris Maloney would get scooped by a big dumb bird. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Whitney Puppy, follow New Rockstars.
Damn, bro, that shit fucking crazy, bro. There's a lot of cameos in that shit, man. I didn't actually expect Daniel Radcliffe to be in Rick and Morty, man. That's some real shit. Anyways, man, if you guys like my reaction, give this video a thumbs up. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace out, motherfuckers.